Welcome back to Fly Past. And my name's Simon. And we are in the Huey. We are flying around Belgium at the moment. And we are at the site of the Battle of Ligny, which is this number 4 number here. And we've just doing a tour of the area of the campaign of Waterloo, getting familiar with some of the sites, and we've just done a big circle around the Prussian area of responsibility, and we're currently well, this is Bry, you can see here. This is where the windmill is, where Wellington would look down on Ligny, which is down here, and we're just going to head over to Quatre Bras. Quatre Bras is follow this road, I believe, this way. And we'll come to Quatre Bras, and then we're going to head south from there, down towards Charleroi, and we'll talk about the French numbers in their army. So, this is where we are on the flight sim currently. I'm just looking for Quatre Bras, which might be to the left here, actually. If you want to join me, I'm on Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. You will find me on the European West server. Okay, so there's Genappe up there. So Quatre Bras is going to be around. You get the sort of idea here if you look over where those blue lines are there. You'll see that is the area where that last blue one is where the battlefield of Ligny is. And if I find Quatre Bras, you'll see the sort of distances involved between the two battlefields. The only problem is, of course, Quatre Bras is not marked. It might be here on the left, actually. Yeah, here it is. So you can see it just here. This is the place called Quatre Bras, obviously 4 arms in translation, and you can see then if you look over from Quatre Bras, basically where that blue last of the blue lines is over there. That's the sort of distance involved between the two places. So this is, you've basically got I think it's like a Roman road going east-west, and then you've got north-south heading up towards Brussels, and eventually the actual battlefield site of Waterloo. This is Quatre Bras. This is where the Allied army, the Anglo-Dutch army, Papontia, the Dutch guy, first of all stops the French here, and we fly. You can fly over to Ligny. You can see that the distance isn't a huge amount going on. This is Sombref. It might be that. Is that the right place, actually? I might have got the wrong place there. Bear with. Fluoresce. It might be a little bit further. If Flight Simulator wanted to put a location, I mean, Quatre Bras would have been a pretty good one to put in because there's not much else you want to see around here. I might have to abandon looking for this right now. It's easier, I think, to find it if you come up from the south. So what we want to do, let's just abandon trying to find Quatre Bras for now. We'll find it on the way back. Let's continue talking about the numbers. So we've done Prussia, we've done the Prussian army, we've done the British army, Anglo-Dutch army. So let's go now down south, and we'll look for Charleroi, and we'll head below Charleroi to look at the area where the French came across the border at a place called near Beaumont. The French army at this stage, this is the Armée du Nord. Now, a lot of this, the French army, they've been drawn back into the army by the charisma of Napoleon, and many of them are veterans. But there is a lot of troops in the French army that are conscripts, so they're less enthusiastic about being here. Many of the veterans are drawn from the Imperial Guard, or drawn into the Imperial Guard. Some of the rules for entering into the Imperial Guard had been relaxed. Some of the veterans insisted that they become part of the Imperial Guard for a reward for joining Napoleon and abandoning the king. a lot of the veterans were trained into junior positions, and they were then put back into the line to instill their sort of spirit and high standards upon the raw ranks and file. But a lot of the things that happened within French army that have broken down in the gap between 1814 and 1815. Many of the actual veterans were now concentrated into the Imperial Guard, and there's a sort of a key core elements of the French army that are always going to be absolutely loyal to Napoleon. But on the 1st of June, Le Champ de Mai in Paris, Captain Cognier of the Imperial Guard sort of noted that the vows to defend the eagles that Napoleon was giving out didn't seem to be given with too much warmth and enthusiasm. Theoretically, Napoleon had around about 300,000 men that he could command, but many of them were ill-equipped, and a lot of them were used to defend the fortresses and the borders, or to put down rebellions in the Vendée. But we're looking possibly at a total number forming on the border here of around about 124,000 men. And so in terms of numbers, it's believed that Napoleon had probably about 60% of the number of the Allies. So we are here at Charleroi. And we're going to just head now south for a little bit to a place called Beaumont. So Charleroi, and we're going to head down to this sort of area of Beaumont. This is where Napoleon would eventually cross. And you need to look at the places like Thuin, Lobes, Walcolt, Ham-sur-Heu. These are, if you see these three lines here, one going through from Beaumont to Charleroi, the other one from Walcolt, around Philippeville, Walcolt, this side, and then the other one on the Binche, route. This is the three routes that the French army take, and they're in three columns when we get to that. Up to this point, though, the morale is excellent for the French. The rank and file love Napoleon, but they are very suspicious of their officers, especially the senior ones. But importantly for Napoleon, he is lacking a lot of his his trusted officers. And the key one that he misses is a guy called Berthier. And Berthier was his regular chief of staff. But he had followed the king into exile. And so he has replaced that role with a guy called Soult. S-O-U-L-T, Soult. Of the armies themselves, if you think about it in terms of quality, it's agreed that the quality of the French army is probably a little bit higher than the others, more homogeneous, united. But a lot of the mistakes that are going to happen, or the reasons that the French lose, some of the reasons, is basically there's a series of errors made, poor judgment calls, some bizarre decisions that are made by the senior members of the French army that arguably doesn't use the French army to its best abilities. And the nature of Napoleonic warfare is to act on impartial information, the ability to interpret information correctly and act accordingly. Usually the person who could do that gains an advantage, because what you really want to do is to make your opponent fight in a way that they don't want to. We spoke about the potential numbers, and the British and the Allies were very aware that, given time, Napoleon would recreate a very large army, and we're talking 800,000 by probably the end of the summer. Effectively, he's got about 217,000, but they're spread around a bit. So he's got this 120,000 troops. And so this is called the Armée du Nord, and it's designated the Grand Army. It consists of 7 corps. The obviously 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 6th. And there's also 4 corps of the Reserve Cavalry and the Imperial Guard. The 1st corps was under the command of the Count d'Erlon. The 2nd was under the command of the Count Reil. 3rd was under the Count Van Damme. The 4th was under Count Gerard. And the 6th was under Count Lobau, L-O-B-A-U. And the 4 corps of the Reserve Cavalry were under the chief command of Marshal Grouchy. The 5th Corps was commanded by Count Rapp and formed the Army of the Rhine. It consisted of about 36,000 men, but that was stationed over in near Strasbourg. They were basically there to watch the principal points of entry along the frontier, where the Austrian and Russian armies were expected. And the 7th Corps was commanded by the Duke of Albufera. They formed the Army of the Alps. It's around about 15,000 troops, which was down at the Italian border and covering the approaches to Lyon. So what we're looking at here is the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 6th Corps arriving. And that represents around about 120,000 men. And we are now down to the south. We're heading towards the French border. So these 120,000 men, we're talking about 84,000 infantry, around about 21,000 cavalry, 11,400 artillery and engineers, and they will be operating around about 350 guns. And so the organisation of the French army was that each corps enabled the army to become basically an articulated machine, capable of spreading over a large area. It allows quick movement, and they would follow orders from a central source, which was Napoleon. Now, Napoleon's strength was strategic. He never commanded anything tactically in his life. He'd never been. He never commanded a regiment or a division or a brigade, so he was not really comfortable with, I suppose, getting his hands dirty tactically. But he was very much a strategic genius, possibly. So he would allow his marshals and these corps commanders a lot of tactical freedom. So usually these corps, as I say, they're almost like mini armies. They would always have 25,000 odd infantry and cavalry and artillery each, with their support units. They would have at least 4 divisions of infantry, 1 division of cavalry, and probably something between 5 and 8 batteries of artillery. And Napoleon, as I say, would give these guys a lot of initiative. They could use a lot of their own initiative, but had to operate under his general umbrella of instructions. The Imperial Guard is an interesting thing because he farmed a lot of the talent into the Imperial Guard. They were his reserve, his own kind of weapon that he would use. He did maintain personal control of his guard. And although it was sort of slightly smaller in size, it still had its own infantry and cavalry and artillery. And the way the French army was split up, they usually had inside these corps. They say they had about 4 divisions. They would have 2 brigades per division, and an infantry brigade would contain anything from 2 to 6 battalions. But he was quite clever, Napoleon. He never had... he never kept the same amount of strength in each of his brigades. So he never wanted his enemy to be able to work out his strength from the units he was using. So that, you know, they couldn't just go, oh, he's got 2 brigades there, so therefore he's got this amount of troops. No, because each brigade could have different amount of battalions in it. A battalion at in Waterloo generally tended to comprise of about 6 companies of men, and each of those companies had about 90 to 100 men strong. Cavalry brigade probably had 2 regiments in it. Each of those would have 3 squadrons, probably consisting of around about 120 men. Now, the way the French liked to operate was in... they would try to operate in this sort of way of a company of infantry would form 3 ranks deep and about 30 men broad. And it didn't tend to change too much from that sort of base sort of way of working. But that was the kind of the basic building block for a French company. There was things that was like regulated. There was the distance between the ranks in the company was like something like 30 to 32 inches. Companies in column were usually around about 68 to 68 feet apart. And they could form line by basically doing a simple sort of 90-degree wheel of each company. They could form close column quite quickly. So it was one of those sort of flexible kind of formations. A brigade could form column quite quickly by having the battalion columns one behind the other and in line parallel to each other. And similarly, a division could have its brigades one behind the other or side by side. Another column arrangement was used at Waterloo was the sort of entire battalion were formed into 3 rank files, and then have all the companies in a single line. Artillery. Let's zoom back. Artillery were formed into these sort of brigades. A brigade was the equivalent of a British battery. French horse artillery, guns, caissons, and other equipment were all horse-drawn, and their gunners were mounted. These units were usually assigned to the cavalry. In the foot artillery, the horses drew the cannon, but the troops marched on foot. Napoleon's strategy most of the time through his career involved sort of elements of surprise sorry, he relied more on power, brute force, basically, than surprise. He was renowned by this time for his strategic brilliance. He would surprise the general, his opponent, on the battlefield. But he would then tend to be a bit more sort of brute force tactically. So he'd use his cause to get his opponent into a position where he could then basically blast them with his artillery, and then send the columns through that weak point. And as he got older, these tactics tended to be can become to the fore. So he would tend to his way of fighting would be, as he got older, would be he would actually fight on a more of a narrower front and be a bit more brute force. He would have heavier cavalry to exploit positions. By the way, this the area we're in now is around the town of Beaumont, and this was where the French congregated before the battle. And Beaumont was the place where Napoleon had his headquarters prior to the advancement, and then they would head up, and Beaumont would be in the center, and then you had three columns basically of French troops advancing north from here towards Charleroi. We'll look into the details of the routes that they took later, but for now we're just going to head north from here and get back to the campaign site. We'll just finish up the French army numbers. So yeah, he had the ability, basically he would pound the line, or he would probe the line in front of him, find a weak spot basically, and then he said he actually says that it's the artillery of my guard which decides most of my battles, because I can bring them into action wherever I wish. So he uses the army to probe weak points, and then he exploits it with his guard. And he would exploit the his enemy. He says by using fresh troops, only using the minimum amount of troops, try to sort of probe his enemy. He would place pressure on different parts of the line. See if they can commit their reserves, and then he would when he's gauged that they've committed their reserves to a certain area, he could then commit the guard to those points of weakness. So overall, the way he operated was to give marshals his command of his cause. He had the overall strategic awareness, and then he would use his chief of staff to write his orders out for him and send them off. Now, Berthier was very good at this. He could interpret the Napoleon's wishes correctly. He would write orders that were clear, and he would ensure that the message got to his the intended core target by sending out multiple messengers. But of course, he is not around anymore, and we have Sue in charge. Now, Sue has never operated as a chief of staff in any rank, in divisional, regiment, whatever. He's never been that that sort of officer. So this is the first time that he's been a chief of staff. So the system was great if you had the right men involved and knew what the overall plan was. But the problem with this campaign is it's kind of rushed a little bit. I think not even Napoleon really knows what he's expecting or who's going to be where. So because of that, and because of the lack of experience with some of his corps commanders, and especially with his chief of staff, and later we will see when we get to Ney, you find that the core element of his officers are not fully up to speed with what his overall plan is. Now, we'll talk about Ney. He actually brings, we talked about him before because he felt a little bit guilty about Ney being back in his chateau, the hero of Borodino, kind of being disgraced. So he says to him, hey, look, you come up to Avesnes, join me by the 14th of June, and I'll make you part of this this campaign. And Ney does come up and arrives very late, meets Napoleon, and Napoleon gives him charge basically of his left wing. So he's got Ney, who's kind of just arrived, so he's not fully up to speed with what's going on. He's got Sue, who's his chief of staff, again, first time operating it. So you can see the omens starting to not look great for the future. Now, the other thing that is interesting about Ney and Sue in particular was that they didn't like each other. In fact, they loathed each other. And Andrew Roberts, he noted that this was the case. There was talks that they had even sort of called each other out at one point. I think it was during the Peninsular Campaign. There was rumors of a duel, potential duel between the two. So whether this is a factor, just keeping it in mind, that Ney and Sue do not get on. They've had a bit of beef in the past. Now, the other thing to keep in mind with Sue in particular is that he was the guy who was basically charged with by the emperor to pursue the British back towards Coruña, and this was when the British Army was under the command of Sir John Moore, not Wellington. And this left Soult with an impression of the British that was probably incorrect. He didn't rank the British Army at all, and he had a poor impression of them. So this is something that we need to take into account when we're thinking about how Soult operates during this campaign. So to summarize, let's just finish this bit here. We will finish up. I'll finish the stream for now, and we'll. I'll be back though in another one this afternoon if you're watching on Twitch. So we'll just finish up the order of battle then that the French have on the eve of the campaign. We're talking that they've got about 128,000 men. There's about 366 guns. We've got the first corps under d'Erlon, and he's got 4 divisions of infantry with him. He's got a cavalry division as well, and he's also got 5-foot batteries and 1 horse battery with him. Second corps is under Rail. He's got again he's got the 5th division, 6th division, 1st light infantry, and 7th division and 9th division, and with a cavalry division under Pire, and an artillery again 5 foot and 1 horse. Third corps, Van Damme. Van Damme's a very brusque kind of guy. I'm not sure where Napoleon would have chosen him if it wasn't for the fact that he needed people good in the field. But again, he has 4 divisions of infantry with him, with the 3rd Cavalry Division under Domon, and the 3rd Corps Artillery. And the 4th Corps is under Gerard, and he has the 12th Division, 13th Division, 14th Division, and he's got the 7th Cavalry Division with him, and the 4th Corps Artillery. And the 6th Corps is Lobau. He's again, he's got about 3 infantry divisions, the 6th Corps of Artillery, and so they're your sort of main sort of workhorse kind of corps. The 1st Cavalry Corps is Pujol. Second Cavalry Corps under Exelmans. And then we get to when you get to the Imperial Guard itself. There's a Grenadier Division, a Chasseurs Division, the Young Guard. You got the Guard Light Cavalry, the Guard Heavy Cavalry. You get the Guard Artillery, and that is your lineup from the French side of things. So we will leave that there for now. When we come back, I'm going to talk. We're going to head back across the battlefield, we'll look at the area of the Quatre Bras and Ligny, and we'll look at the sort of routes that they took. We'll look at some of the tactics. We'll talk about some of the equipment that they have, and we will then, by the end of that, we'll be at the position then to start the actual campaign proper, having a look at having got all the infantry and the numbers all sorted. So I hope that's been helpful for you. I hope you found that interesting, and if you did, please like and subscribe. I know it can be a bit dry, but you know, that's the way it is. And I will see you then in the next one. Thank you very much for watching on Twitch. Thank you, Guy at the back, for being my bestest commentator, co-pilot. Thank you to everyone who's watching on YouTube, and I'll see you in the next one when we talk equipment and tactics.